We'd like to welcome you out to this rapid fire session with members of the Housing Gap Committee. So we will have 3 rapid fire speakers. We will first hear from Karen McCandless, and then Representative Stephen Whyte, and then from Nate Hutchison. And we'll go to that point. Just as a reminder, if you would please turn off any ringers. We ask that that you be respectful of our speakers and pay attention and be engaged. Here's Karen.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you for a few minutes about housing. Let me see here. Let's see if that's us. This is me. I am the CEO of Community Action Services and Food Bank in Provo, and our service area is Utah, Summit, and Wasatch counties. A little bit more about me. I have a degree in land use planning, and that was where a lot of my land and housing experience came from. I worked for cities as a planner. I've worked for developers, attorneys. I've been on both sides of the counter, so to speak, and on both sides of in the public meetings too. I served for 13 years on the Orem City Council. So I've had a breadth of experience in this issue, and it's an issue that I feel pretty passionate about. So I wanted to talk today about AMIs and ADUs and McKinney-Vento, oh my. Because there are so many different types of things that go on in the community with housing. Millard Fuller, who was the founder of Habitat for Humanity, said, "For a community to be whole and healthy, it must be based on love and concern for each other." So what we have in our community is we have what's called the Mountain Land Continuum of Care. And it is a group of organizations and interested people who want to address housing. So what is a continuum? First of all, on one end of the spectrum, we have the unsheltered homeless. That is where I spend a lot of time right now. Just to give you some numbers here, we did a point in time count in January. HUD requires that it be in January, so we do it in January. Of those we counted 241 individuals experiencing homelessness in January. Of those, 37% indicated they were homeless due to an incident of domestic violence. That's 37%. 13% said they struggled with substance abuse. 25% said they struggled with mental health. We have 4 veterans and 65 of what we call chronically homeless individuals. And homeless in this particular case means that they are living in an area that's unfit for habitation. McKinney-Vento on that prior slide, McKinney-Vento is another definition of homelessness that you'll hear with school districts, and it is pretty much living somewhere that isn't your house. So if you're couch surfing, if you're living with family, or things like that, you would fit into that McKinney-Vento definition. So if you have a McKinney-Vento definition, you're going to have a much broader view, about a bigger number of those experiencing homelessness as compared to the Department of Housing and Urban Development definition, where you're living somewhere that's not made for human habitation, like a car, a viaduct, a riverbank, or something like that. The second area that we have, emergency shelters. That's the next step on the continuum. And we currently do not have any emergency shelters in Utah County. What we have is emergency motel vouchers. That's Community Action runs that and helps find places for people to stay short term. One of the largest gaps that we as a continuum of care are trying to address is what do we have in our community, or what can we have in our community for individuals who need shelter from like day 5 to day 30. The next is transitional housing. Transitional housing is somewhere that someone's going to live for maybe up to a year or so until they can find permanent housing. We do have that in the community. With Food and Care Coalition, they have some units that have been in operation for a number of years, and that is part of that. Supportive housing. This is housing for individuals that we have just talked about that may need some of those wraparound services like mental health services from Wasatch Behavioral Health or life skills, things like that. We have a couple of different projects. Provo City Housing Authority has 2 converted apartment buildings, and they have that supportive housing there. Food and Care Coalition just opened 72 units on their property to provide some supportive housing. The next is subsidized housing. Subsidized housing is something that we could always use help with as an agency, finding landlords that are willing to take Section 8 vouchers and are willing to work with our individuals that we serve. The next item on the continuum is affordable housing. This is where we get a lot of different comments. This is where a lot of people think about affordable, meaning what, that seems to be a broad definition. The next and final area that we work with the continuum of care is market rate rental and ownership. So what's being done? So we have good things or bad things. Just depends on who you ask. You'll see here at the bottom we have different types of accessory dwelling units. The City of Provo just approved some legislation regulating accessory dwelling units. The state legislature, was it 2 sessions ago? I think it was 2 sessions ago? Made some mandates on the amount of accessory dwelling units that are allowed in a community, or a minimum number to be allowed in a community. That middle picture is a picture of a motel being renovated. This is nationally, this is what is being done a lot, is with the COVID money that has been available, the ARPA money, other types of funding, purchasing, master leasing, and redeveloping motels to be housing for those experiencing homelessness, to be something that are those first few areas that I talked about, the unsheltered to become the emergency shelter, to become the transitional, to become the supportive. So this type of product is something that covers a lot of areas. And like I said, we are already doing that here in Utah County. And then on the far right, that is the new unit, 72 units at Food and Care Coalition. And so is it good? I think it's good. Is it bad? I think bad design can be an issue. I think that Nate Hutchison is going to talk about that a little bit, is about the design. But we're doing some things, but we can always do more. What do we need? Well, that depends on the why. And so I was going to say that we don't necessarily need these types of housing products in our community, but they look like some of them could be fun Airbnbs somewhere. But anyway, so what is it that we need as a community? And I'm going to skip to a point here that was made in a meeting that was held. I think Representative Whyte was at the meeting, Unified Economic Opportunity Commission. This was in end of September. The subcommittee on housing affordability talked about this. What is needed? Well, in Utah, we have several different areas. We have rural areas, we have urban areas, and we have some different programs already in place to help with that. So housing rehabilitation, funding for housing rehabilitation. I saw Brad Bishop here, who heads up the USDA Mutual Self-Help, the self-help homes, where people can obtain and have home ownership. The Utah Housing Corporation, credit to own, the Crown programs and short-term rentals are a concern. I am running out of time, which I knew I would, but there was a group called Attainable Housing Subgroup in this. I hope I'm not taking anything that you're in this meeting, Governor Cox said that we are sleepwalking to California. And I couldn't tell, I was listening, and I think it was Senator Fillmore said that, I'm actually going to tie into what's that we being the legislators, want to carry a bill that is bold and makes a real and substantive difference. So there are all sorts of different types of options out there that the legislature is looking at, and changing development standards, municipal incentives, down payment assistance program incentives, accountability for the moderate income housing plan. But I wanted to make sure that I spent enough time talking to you about what you can do. And I said it needs to take courage to do what I believe needs to be done. Because in my opinion, as a former elected official, all roads lead to government. I know in the survey that came out, and I appreciate all of you who answered that, said a lot of the responses were, we need more higher density housing, we need to have more a variety of housing types, and it all goes to elected officials. It goes into elected officials, and then it goes into the members of the community. So what I say, if you're up to it, become a champion of housing. Become educated. There are a lot of different places you can gather information about local housing situations. Pam G. Gardner Policy Institute has a housing affordability, what are best practices and why are they important? Utah Foundation is The Middle Missing, a guide to expanding options for Utah homebuyers and renters. Filling in the Blanks, which is also from the Utah Foundation, how Utah communities deploy infill development and advance quality of life. Have the courage to become a champion for these different types of housing, because everybody needs to have a place to live. That is something that I truly believe that one of the phrases that I heard from Brian Stevenson, who wrote Just Mercy, is that there are members of our community there are people who are excluded from the human community. And we may not be doing that intentionally, but I think housing is an issue where we can include everybody. Another thing he said, as far as being a champion, I'm going to paraphrase what he said as well, is for all of us to develop a greater intolerance for inequality, or you can say inequity. Everybody needs a place to live. And I, in my current position, have that wonderful opportunity and challenging opportunity to work particularly with those first items on that continuum, and we're going to continue to work toward that. And I appreciate the work that the state has done, that local governments are doing. Some local governments have actually gone in the other direction, so that those communities you may have to muster even more courage to go say, you know what, we need housing for everybody. So with that, I'm going to end, and I think it is Representative Whyte is next. And that's my contact. I'll leave that there while you come up and...
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Whyte. It is a privilege to be with all of you here today and to be participating in the second annual Utah Valley Growth and Prosperity Summit. Looking here across the room, we have mayors, city council members, we have CEOs, we have educators, religious leaders, community leaders, we have citizens, housing experts in here. So I appreciate all of you being here and also being involved. Last year, I had the opportunity to be elected to the House of Representatives, and it's been such a privilege and an honor to be able to serve with you and to be able to be involved in such important issues. Karen, thank you for the great presentation and talking about such critical needs right here within our communities and state and throughout our Utah County right here. I have been asked to share a couple of perspectives relating to housing affordability, as earlier this year, a couple of months ago, the Speaker of the House asked me to co-chair the state's Commission on Housing Affordability. During the last couple of months, I have learned a tremendous amount about housing affordability and continuing to learn about it because it seems like it's kind of like an onion that has a lot of different layers of complexity. So I am going to spend the next 11 minutes with you, sharing with you some problems, principles and policies that I have observed relating to housing affordability. Now, this image that was taken in Utah and provided to me by the Kim C. Gardner Institute of Public Policy shows the close interconnectedness of housing affordability right here. We have construction, right up here on the left hand, construction with high-density housing. We have homelessness in the areas of permanent supportive housing. And we also have a tight housing market, demands for housing, and institutional investors. Now, we've all seen the headlines over this past year that are daunting and concerning about what we are experiencing in all aspects of the state with a lot of different populations. So let's look behind the data behind these headlines to be able to see what's taking place now and what might also take place here in the future. All of the data I'll be sharing with you comes from the Kim C. Gardner Public Policy Institute as of August of this year. So looking at the numbers of units and households, there is some good news in that the housing shortage has improved. In 2017, Utah was short about 56,000 units. Today, we're short about 30,000 units, so a gap of about 25,000 units has been filled. That's some good news. But the state is still needing right now approximately 30,000 units to keep up with our current number of households. Construction costs are another significant reason why housing prices have increased. The national average this last year has been a 23% increase of housing costs due to materials and labor. Now, speaking of housing costs, the average median sales price of a home in Utah right now is at approximately $500,000. A few months ago, the median household price was about $534,000, so it's decreased slightly over the last couple of months, but it is still extremely expensive. In fact, expensive enough that approximately 70% of all Utahns are unable to afford the median sales price of $500,000 home. Now, compounding housing expenses, the average asking rent is also increasing at historic rates that we have never seen. Another important aspect of all of this is looking at population trends. The majority of first-time home buyers buy their first home between the ages of 27 and 31 years old, which is shown in the gray vertical bar on the chart. The red line represents Utah's population by age. Look at the spike on the left of the chart showing that we have a large population boom between the ages of 20 and 24. The 2020s is about young buyers moving into the average time of life where they typically buy their very first home. We're going to see as a state an increase in the demand for first-time home buyers within the next 7 years. Now, conversely, this chart shows the baby boomer generation. In the 2030s, seniors who have owner-occupied homes will be passing away, leaving many open homes in more established and expensive parts of communities. Now, the state's population projection shows that there's going to be a need for an additional 250,000 units built by 2030 to meet current and future housing demands. Utah County is in the epicenter of this growth. It is projected that Utah County alone, there's going to be a need of an additional 66,000 units that will need to be built by 2030. And our very last data slide here shows the types of homes that are available and the types of homes that are needed in Utah to meet our population demands. The types of units that are needed are sometimes referred to as the missing middle. This graph is fascinating to me because it shows a typical cost of a home depending upon the lot size or the acre size. The missing middle housing options of duplex side-by-side and stacked, fourplexed stacked, courtyard buildings, cottage courts, townhomes, multiplex medium, triple stacked, and also live and work options provide a menu of possibilities that more people are able to afford. Well, looking at all this data, I like to keep things simple. looking at all of this for the last couple of months, I have concluded or proposed that we have two major problems. First, demands exceeds our supply. We have a supply-demand issue. And then we have a problem with not in my backyard mentality. I hear, quote, yes, we need the missing middle options, but I don't want those or those people in my backyard. A significant challenge of this feeling is that those in our backyard will primarily be our children and our grandchildren. So this leads to the topic of principles. I believe that good principles create good policy. Here's what I am hearing from people throughout the state regarding good principles that we can base good policies on. The principles include home ownership strengthens families and communities, which research backs up. Every person should have the opportunity to have a place to live regardless of their phase in life. Property rights must be protected. Capitalism drives innovation and prosperity. Every entity must support the rule of law. We can't have laws without penalties. Make data-informed decisions. Accountability, consistency, predictability, and fairness are principles that good policies can be based upon. Well, building upon these policies, we also need to look at key populations. There are renters who are facing increasing rates and they can't afford to be able to get out of the renting to be able to buy a home. There's the first-time home buyers who can't afford to buy a home, and this long-term demand is only going to increase in the state. We have retirees. Increasing property values resulting in higher property taxes is forcing out fixed income retirees from their homes. And as retirees die, homes will come on the market in more established, expensive areas, exacerbating the divide of housing affordability. And we have low and moderate income families who can't afford to buy a home, and the homeless who are unable to find permanent supportive housing. Well, from a policy perspective, the big question is, what should citizens, cities, counties, and the state do to help people? As policies are considered, there are some strategic questions that must be asked. So for the policies that are going to be proposed now into the future, will this policy proposal increase the supply of homes? Will it result in more housing that is actually affordable to the buyer? Will it allow more affordable housing types to be built for our younger generations? And will this policy proposal result in good planning? During the past 5 years, the state has taken on the issues of housing affordability by passing 18 different pieces of legislation dealing with different aspects of the state, of this issue. To be very candid, I believe that much of the low-hanging fruit and opportunities have been addressed during the past several years with a tremendous amount of work that's involved. Utah is now at a point of addressing the very big, the very complex, and the very challenging issues. Well, the legislative session begins in 3 months. The Commission on Housing Affordability has been meeting throughout the summer, preparing for the upcoming session. Now, this commission is part of a subgroup of the Governor's Unified Economic Opportunity Commission. The Commission on Housing Affordability has several different subgroups that Karen just mentioned that address different aspects of this issue. There's the Attainable Housing subgroup, there's the Rural subgroup, there's the Land Use Task Force, and a lot of other subgroups. Each of these groups right now are proposing solutions that could turn into policy concepts for the upcoming legislative session. Now, this slide, I have broken every PowerPoint rule out there on the books. There's way too much information here, but this is just a small sampling of policy proposals and ideas that are currently being presented and discussed by a lot of people throughout the state. Nothing has been finalized. There are proposals up here that are listed that are receiving broad consensus from all the stakeholders in the state. There are other proposals listed here that there are some very heavy arm wrestling going on right now as well. Just a few examples. The Utah state needs to create a holistic 30-year master statewide housing plan, which does not exist. Another idea, increase low-income tax credits. Ensure all cities are following state law by having moderate income housing plans. Fund upfront infrastructure costs for cities to help offset expenses so more homes could be built. Look at housing density around state investment areas like transportation corridors. Create a savings plan similar to the education savings account, My 529, I believe, where people can start putting money in to start accruing interest for their first-time home purchases. Or also increasing trade and vocational training to tackle labor shortages in home building construction industry. These are just a sampling of many ideas that are on the table that are being discussed right now. I feel that the Utah Valley Chamber of Commerce's position on the issue of housing affordability provides great principles, guidance, and also recommendations. Quote, the Utah Valley Chamber of Commerce supports a diversified mix of housing stock that allows for vibrant, affordable communities. Such communities are possible only when communities have a variety of home inventory and diverse zoning options. Well, to address this statewide issue, here is what I believe that we all in this room with citizens, cities, counties, and states must do to be able to move this forward. The private sector and government must work together. The entire state needs to work together to creatively solve these problems. We need everyone to come to the table to work together and to listen to each other. We're going to have to make some decisions that are difficult that may not make everybody in the state happy. We need to create understanding that Utah's growth equals prosperity, and to change our mindsets because the not in my backyard perspectives are detrimental to our children and grandchildren. I am confident that we'll be able to jointly work together to collaboratively work these issues to be able to help make housing more affordable in the future. So thank you for the opportunity to be able to be with you, and thank you for your involvement with this important issue. Thanks.
Thank you to Karen and Representative Whyte. I've had the privilege to work with both of them now on these topics for quite some time. Also, to Representative Whyte, he has his daughter here, Rebecca, who works with the Chamber, and we've worked with her for a long time. She is going on an LDS mission, and she put her availability date a few days after this conference. That's how dedicated she is to this conference. So she'll be leaving, I believe, to Alaska in the next few days. So thank her for all the hard work she's done. I'm one of the owners of Flagship Companies. We primarily started as a residential home builder with Flagship Homes, and we've gotten into a lot more to office and retail and multifamily over the last couple of years. And I think one of the things that housing is a very emotionally charged issue, especially when we talk about it in regards to housing around our housing and different types of housing that may come in our neighborhoods that are different than the stuff that's historically been built. But I want to hit my first slide and the most important slide, and this is something that we just always have to keep at the forefront of our minds. The governor talked this morning in his speech about oil and gas prices. And you know, conservatives, which many people in this state are conservatives. Matt Packard, hello, sir. Haven't seen you in a little while. Conservatives believe that we need to drill more oil and gas to bring prices down. So they beat that drum. We need to do that, and sure, we need to work on renewable sources of energy, but in the meantime, until we get the technology that gets us there, we've got to continue to produce oil and gas. And the more we drill, prices come down. But then when it comes to housing, and we talk about housing attainability and housing affordability, we don't realize that we just have to build more housing to bring price of housing down. And that's something that we need, the missing middle. We need more of all types of housing in Utah, and the more we build, the faster prices come down. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about, today I'm going to talk a little bit more about why and how we should do some of these things, and maybe not specific reasons in different types of housing. So historically, this is a very common thing you'll find in journals from those that settled Utah back in the 1800s. This is speaking about a woman, new immigrants who arrived in Utah in poor health or poor circumstances were sure of assistance if they came to her. She never turned anyone away who was hungry or weary. They would actually build cabins for those crossing the plains and planned on planting farms for those that were coming in the future. And that is kind of where we've been historically and why Utah has been such a great place and a great community, because we've had people historically that have lived here that have felt this way, and they're planning for the future. And many of you in here today are the same type of people. That's why you're here. We're trying to figure out how to solve these issues. And another thing is it's a lot easier. Some of the city council members are here that I've been in meetings with that sometimes get a little contentious. I didn't point fingers. But it's a lot easier to talk about these issues when we're not emotionally charged over a certain development that's being proposed. So I think it's really important, and this is something we're trying to do on our side as home builders and developers, is get in and meet with cities when we're not talking about specific projects, so that we can work through some of these issues and it doesn't become as emotionally charged. So now I'm going to talk for a little bit about the different types of housing and how the change of housing type over the years have caused problems in our communities from a cultural, societal, mental health, and physical health problems. So historically, we used to have third places, and a lot of the places we all like to travel in the world, in Europe especially, these are all cities and countries that were developed before the advent of the car. So they're much more walkable, there's a lot of density, their streets are narrow, so it's designed around people and not around cars. Many cities that we live in now and what we're building today, we first think of cars, and then we think about people after that. And so one of the things I think we need to start changing is we need to start changing the paradigm shift back to designing cities and communities around people. And then, and it still needs to work for transportation and public transit and some of these other things. Historically, this used to be called, this has been termed a third place by Ray Oldenburg, and he explains these places as cafes, bars, libraries, clubs, barbershops, parks, churches, and plazas. All of these things, and especially here, you hear a lot in Utah that church attendance is dwindling across America, and that's a concern for a lot of people that live in places like Utah. The same goes for libraries and clubs and everything else, parks. It's all going down. We spend much more time in isolation today than people have historically spent. That's not good for mental health. That's not good for physical health. And that's something that we need to work on as we design communities of density, which historically here in Utah, as home builders, we actually haven't done a very good job of this. We'll come into a community, a suburban community, and we'll say we're going to build some townhomes. There's a lot of outrage, apartments, et cetera, and it's not designed in a much larger plan. And so today I'll talk a little bit about how we can do this. This is how you see communities today. This is suburban sprawl. In the book, Bowling Alone, I like this quote. He's noted that a steady decline for decades of dropping club memberships, church attendance, and forms of social participation. And the biggest reason this is happening is because we've become a much more car-dependent suburban sprawl society. And for example, the less dense areas you have, commerce can't thrive. You can't have neighborhood commerce, which is why we've seen things move more towards large malls, et cetera. And all cities, big and small, have have historically had these densely populated downtowns where people experience these chance encounters and supported local businesses with foot traffic. Euclidean zoning is what happened around the 1900s at the advent of the car. What happened was we used to be able to work, worship, play, socialize, and recreate all within walking distance of our homes. And then at the advent of the car, what happened was, and we had factories that produced a lot of soot and a lot of pollution. And what happened was, is we said, oh, we got to keep the factories away from where we live. It's just not good for health. So they'd put factories over here. They'd build housing stock over here. We started seeing large department stores and malls that were built over here. And what this has caused is trillions of dollars of infrastructure and then large parks in certain areas where you'd go. Like when I was a kid growing up, we'd have a ball field or two around our house. We could walk there, play with our friends. Now we've clustered a lot of these parks in giant regional parks that are miles away from our home so that we can have 50 soccer games on a Saturday all going at one time. It's much cheaper to maintain those types of parks, et cetera. But what this has caused is we've created this society where we have trillions of dollars of infrastructure now that needs to be spent getting people from these different places. And so over the last 20 years, as urban planners have been looking at this, they've been saying, well, our factories and our offices aren't creating the pollution and problems that they used to historically cause in the early 1900s. So what we ought to do is we ought to be working harder to bring these back together so that we can have these walkable places that we can work, worship, play, recreate, et cetera, all within walking distance of our own homes. So this is a picture of the same place in 1910 in this beautiful walkable area, and this is what this exact place looks like in 2020. This is a United States football stadium and a soccer stadium or football stadium in Europe here, and those two stadiums have the same seating capacity. And you just get a different look at the different environment and type of life that those types of communities create. If you've ever been to a Red Sox game or experienced a Los Angeles Dodgers game, not trying to argue which one you ought to cheer for, but you go to Boston Red Sox game, you can take the train right to the stadium. It's 5 minutes from a 5-minute walk from many of the hotels and shops downtown. It's a very, very calming, delightful walking experience as you go there. And if you've been to a Dodger game, you go to the game, you got to leave about 3 hours early. You make it in, if this is a playoff game, you get in about 3 innings late, and then you're stressed the whole time because you're like, I don't want to be in the parking lot after this dumb game for another 10 hours. So you leave in the 7th, 8th inning if there's a few run lead, and that's the different experience that's created in both of those environments. So this is what we're left with in a society that doesn't plan density well and create these experiences where we can create this living, working, worshiping, play experience all in walking distance of each other. We become very isolated, as Dwight here from the office is, watching himself online. Starbucks here in this setting, they've got a 30-car line to get coffee instead of just a walking area where you grab something on your way to work, et cetera. And so what we need to do is we need to combine house and commerce. And one of the problems we have in Utah, too, is with our tax code, the way it's written. Cities generate a lot of their income off of sales tax. So they're very motivated to get sales tax and commerce retail type experiences so that they can pay for all their bills. The problem is then they go to areas and they say, this has to be retail and commerce. It's like, well, it's been like this for 50 years. You just don't have the population to have 900 acres of commerce in the middle of nowhere. But there's no incentive for them to provide housing for that. And as you work with anyone on the retail side of things, they look at things and it's all about rooftops around a certain area. So those of you here from cities that are more built out, what I would recommend you do is look at your areas of commerce and retail that have lots of parking lots and work for the developers, with the developers that own those office buildings and those retail centers, malls, et cetera, and help work with them on providing housing within walking distance, redeveloping their parking lots, et cetera, into housing. That will make your commerce better. They're already clustered, those are usually already clustered around your transportation corridors. And it's an easy way to provide housing and help solve some of these other supply and demand issues. One thing that we're working on, and I think I'm out of time in about 30 seconds, we've got a big project in Vineyard. We've bought the rest of the Geneva steel mill. And we've got Cash here from Vineyard City, great planner tech there. And we're working on designing the most walkable, dense, urban community in the history of the state of Utah, right next to the front runner station. We have unlimited height, we have unlimited density, and this is a place, and you'll see over the next few years this project develop, where we're trying to create this. And what I hope you'll see in some of the cities that have historically been more anti-density, we're hoping to create a place where you can come visit and say, oh, this is where density has been done right, it's been well planned, it's clustered around transportation corridors, and this is something that hopefully we can take to some of the other cities and replicate there. Thank you for your time today.
I'd like to thank you for your presentations, and I know that it's given me a lot to kind of chew on and think about, and hopefully you feel the same way. We want to give you each a little token of appreciation from the chamber. We now have about a 15-minute break. There's the hospitality suite across the hall over here, or you can just stay in here and network and hang out, and then we'll get started with another rapid fire session in here right at 11:30.
There's waters and there's snacks over in the hospital.
Waters and snacks over in the hospitality suite as well, and a place to relax and network. Started now, so if you want to find a seat, that would be great. All right, if you're looking for the transportation infrastructure rapid fire session, you're in the right place. If you're looking for Econ 1010, you may need to go elsewhere. Just kidding. We'd like to welcome you out again to this transportation infrastructure rapid fire session. We will have 4 speakers, just go back to back to back to back. And then we'll have a break. So we'll start with, well, first, a few housekeeping items. Please make sure that your phone is on vibrate so we don't interrupt the speakers, and just be very courteous of the speakers and their time. We're lucky and grateful to have them here. So we'll start with Andrew Jackson, and then we'll hear from Chad Whitlock, and then Alan Matheson, and then Mary de la Mar Schaefer. And we'll go to that point.
Is this the advance thing, I guess? There's me, oh boy, Pumpkinhead. I'm Andrew Jackson. I'm the Executive Director of Mountain Land Association of Governments. I've worked for MAG for 27 years and have worked in the planning field for 33 years. Just wanted to clear something up. Does this need to be closer?
Yes, and so we can hear you on the screen.
Alrighty, perfect. So I just want to clear one thing up, and that is my parents were not an Andrew Jackson fan. They didn't realize that my name was the same name as the president until I was in first grade, and they came home and said, hey, I got the same name as the president. So on my mother's side, for 400 years, there's always been an Andrew, and it just happened that with my dad's side, my mom's side, I ended up being Andrew Jackson. So I always gave all the book reports and everything on him in school. So here's one of the things that I just really get passionate about, and I'll probably start crying as I talk about this, but in Utah we have sales tax that goes towards transportation. Some of it goes towards transit, some of it goes towards roads, etc. There are 8 options to get the 4 quarters. Utah County has 4 quarters in, and then there's the fifth, which is a 0.20 that would go towards transit as well, and that's not implemented in any county except for Summit County. But this is how we fund our transportation, and I'll get into a little bit more about that. This just shows on the tax rate sheet how that's calculated. So when we talk about transportation, we have what's called a street hierarchy. So you have freeways, arterials, which would be like, say, 800 North in Orem, and then you've got collectors, which would be like maybe a center street in Orem, and then you've got the local neighborhood roads in your community. These are classified in state code as Class A and B, Class B and C, and Class C. Class A are state roads, Class B are county roads, Class C are city roads, and Class D are like dirt roads in some of the rural areas. And then the transit system that parallels or runner, it parallels I-15, and it's the higher speeds. And then you've got tracks and BRT that would be on the arterials, collectors or bus, local roads get none, just kidding. You would actually have microtransit or paratransit there where you've got just a few individuals that need specific transit. So if you look at this, freeways, you're moving traffic, you're moving people, you have limited access. You can't just pull off the freeway and go to a store that you see just off the freeway. You have to get off the exit, typically. I've seen a few people that have peeled off there. And then arterials, you got a little bit more of some land access, but you're still trying to move people along. You have limited access. Maybe you have to go into a driveway to access several stores, the collector roads. And then local roads are mainly just to access property. You've got a driveway at every house, et cetera, right? So we've got the emphasis on traffic movement, emphasis on land access. And then this is a thing that I like to call Jackson's theory of transportation funding. And my wife reminds me that I'm the only one that calls it that. But there should be some connection between a tax and how it's used. And so we have gas tax, gasoline tax, and that's typically used on freeways and arterials. 70% of the gas tax in Utah goes to UDOT, and then the 30% goes to counties and cities. Then we have sales tax in the middle there on the arterials and collectors, and that should be based on your accessing commercial property. So sales tax is a very important part of this. And then property tax should be spent more on the local roads because you're accessing property. And then you've got general fund that actually kind of commingles a lot of this. One of the things that we have in Utah in the Constitution is that the gas tax cannot go towards transit. It goes towards roads. It doesn't say not for transit, but it says to be used only for roads. With the federal gasoline tax, 3 cents of that actually goes to the Federal Transit Authority. But the thing I really want to talk about here is this half-mile grid system. And we talk about corridor preservation, and you probably have some speakers that talked about congestion and the growth, et cetera, that are going in. And we have this grid spacing that's determined by the Institute of Traffic Engineers. They spend a lot of time figuring out what the ideal spacing is for these different types of roads. One of the things that we have is that in Utah County, we kind of grew organically. Different communities that didn't touch, and then they would just grow and grow. And there wasn't really a grid system or grid pattern that we followed. We have some grid systems, but they're different. So Provo, for instance, it's 11 blocks to a mile. In Orm, it's 8 blocks to a mile. And in the county, it's even more than that. And so that's why we have 3 different address systems. If you're trying to find something in that American Fork, Pleasant Grove area that, you know, one's in Pleasant Grove and the other one's American Fork and the other one's in Pleasant Grove, it's really hard to find that because they have different address systems. And they have different grid spacing, how they developed back when it was first settled. So what we're wanting to do is to get with the legislature, and we've talked with them about doing a grid study in Utah County, especially in the fast-growing areas, where we can identify these areas that need to be wider roads that can handle more traffic, and we can get ahead of the curve on that. So we can see, look, this is where this should be. Maybe it's not exactly 800 north, maybe it's 900 north, or maybe it's 900 east, or whatever, but at least we can go through and have a major study to determine where this grid system should be and where future corridors should be preserved, and then we can get those corridors ahead of time before we're taking out houses or subdivisions, et cetera, for it. This shows the ideal grid system up in Salt Lake. You can see that it has developed pretty close to that grid system up in Salt Lake County. But you notice that down in the south part of the county, where it grew, again, more organically, like Utah County did, that they didn't follow the grid system completely. And that's where you have a lot of the congestion and issues in Salt Lake. And, oops, I wonder how you go back on this. Anyway, I'll just talk without that slide. Let's see, I'm trying to think what I was going to say. So as you do this grid system, this grid pattern, then we can get out ahead of growth, and be able to get the areas preserved. So with that, I'll turn it over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Oh, that's the wrong one. All right, my name is Chad Whitlock. I am the COO for the Utah Inland Port Authority. You've probably heard of us in the news a little bit. Ben Hart, the executive director, couldn't make it today. He extends his regards and regrets over that. Before I get into what I'm going to discuss today, I want to extend gratitude to, whoops. What happened? What did I do, AV folks? Pardon? This is my luck. This is why I don't go gamble in Vegas. So while we're doing this, we want to extend our gratitude to the Utah Valley Board of Commerce for inviting us to be here today. And I also want to extend gratitude to each of you for being here today and to listen to what we have to say. If you saw the slide that I had up briefly, it said supply and demand. You're here to talk about transportation, and you can't talk about transportation without talking about supply and demand. Supply and demand drives it all. And so you're not in the wrong room, and you are talking to the organization that under statute, we are responsible for economic development, and we're also responsible for the transportation of goods and services throughout the state. One of the things that I want to start with in terms of supply and demand is I want to talk about global supply and demand and some of the forces and headwinds that are facing us today. The first one that I want to talk about is demographics. Globally, demographics are starting to work against a lot of different countries out there. If you're not familiar with demographics, for every woman you need to have 2.1 replacement people in order for your population to continue to grow. And the reason why that's important is because when you have a population that is growing, you have a population that you can dip into for workforce, and you also have a population that you can dip into for consumption. And what you just heard was supply and demand. So when you are a country such as China, where you're at a 1.3, 1.2, depending on some of the data sources that you're looking at, or if you're Korea, South Korea, which is at 0.8, you are looking at many countries globally that are depopulating. And what's happening is you have the older working cohorts within those countries that are aging into retirement, and when you're in retirement, your consumer habits change. They become a lot more conservative, and you are consuming still, you're just not consuming as much, and you're out of the workforce. And if those replacement bodies aren't there, you're in trouble. And the trouble extends to there is no quick fix for this. It's happening, and that fix has to happen over decades, and it is having more babies. That's the fix. So if you're thinking AI might be an example or that robots might be a fix on this, then we're very, very far, or we have a very far road to travel in order to hit either one of those goals as an alternate, right, for the workforce and especially on the consumption dynamics that happen within a country. So what that means then is globally you will start seeing countries having the inability to produce, supply, and consume the supply that's being produced. The opportunity for Utah is if we go out and we recruit these companies that are now looking for a space to operate, simply because they don't have the supply and demand dynamics in their own country, we can bring them here and we can have them do business here in the state. One of the other dynamics that we're playing with and that we have a headwind that, is playing against us is the supply chain itself. You are looking at a deglobalization of supply chain. You've got the factory of the world, which is China right now, and you see because of geopolitical type of forces, right, you see that there is a movement away from a global supply chain, deglobalization of the supply chain, into a regionalization of supply chain. So what does that mean then for the state of Utah? Well, it means then that the global supply chain is so tangled up right now, and the shifts have to happen so much so that when the regionalization occurs on supply chain, we can position ourselves to take advantage of that and be a part of that. And you've already seen this happen. In fact, this was already happening before COVID even hit, where we had the just-in-time type of inventory system that companies have come to enjoy because they had established the global supply chain. Those were starting to crack and unravel, and then COVID accelerated that. And so in taking those supply chains and going from a deglobalization into a regionalization on the supply chain, that puts Utah and United States in an interesting position where we can take advantage of that.
Sorry, Chad.
Yeah, it's not a problem. Not a problem at all. Okay? And so why are we, if we're talking about demographics, in a good place? Because the United States, from a demographic perspective, doesn't need to worry about any kind of pressures until the 2050s. We're good to go. Other countries have to start worrying about it right now. And before 2050, they're going to really have to start worrying about it. And so then we have the supply chains that are in play, and then resources. And I've heard some discussion around this already today in the housing session that I was just sitting through. So resources are becoming more and more of a thing. We do not have the capacity to meet global demand for oil. That is creating problems, and energy powers everything. You get your Amazon at your doorstep, and you get it with energy, regardless the type. And it's going to be a long time before we can get ourselves divested of oil, by the way. Green energy and green tech is fantastic, it's ramping, but it's not yet the holistic solution that everybody needs it to be right now. And so we have resources that are becoming more scarce, and resources that, when they become available in that regional supply chain, can be leveraged. And so along with demographic, supply chain, and scarce resources, the other headwind that we have facing us is climate change. And we're all here in the state looking at climate change and the effects that it's having here within our communities. And this, especially having to work with a lot of the environmental groups that are surrounding Salt Lake City, or the Great Salt Lake right now, has become a very, very hot topic. And so our opportunity then as a state is, how do we take advantage of these global type of forces that are in play, bring them into Utah, leverage them in Utah, and do it in a sustainable and environmental manner. And we can do that, we just need to figure it out. And so what this means then is, by 2050, we're thinking of 1.5 million people being here in Utah County, and there's going to need to be some things that change with that. And I'm going to set aside the 1.5 million people. That is its own supply and demand dynamic. I want to put that aside right now. The opportunities that we have, and what we'll need to do, is we'll need to have kind of figure out what our infrastructure needs are going to be to take advantage of these market forces that are happening on a global scale. We're going to need to take a look at our industrial space and increase our industrial space. We need to pay attention to automation, and this is going to be a big one, because you've got New York, the state of New York just opened their an air drone delivery corridor, and you will see drone delivery not just with air, but also with trucking become a thing by the time we hit 1.5 million people in 2050. And so how do we manage that? And the infrastructure that needs to go up for that to support it, you need a very wide, powerful, low latency communications IT system, right, that handles all the signaling, especially when you've got large trucks on the road that are driverless and that are delivering goods. And so green tech becomes a thing as well. So how do we leverage green tech and do this responsibly and do it so that we are not as reliant on oil or as reliant on some of the other dirtier energy sources, while also positioning ourselves to take advantage of all of the opportunities that are going to just happen globally. And then the need for increased industrial commodities. When you have people that are moving their businesses here, they need to consume. It's going to be the input so that they can create their output. So if it's ore that I'm going to refine into steel, or if it's just little components, right? I was looking the other day on a componentry for your automobile. There is for your mirrors, your external mirrors on your car, there's componentry that takes 3 states and 2 ocean trips over the Pacific Ocean just to get it assembled to a place where it can be put in your mirror, in your car. It is that kind of input that goes into manufacturing that creates the goods that we consume, and we'll have to identify what that is and how we get it here. And then the need to move goods, and this is where it gets interesting because I've talked about drones, I've talked about air delivery. How do we do this in a way that preserves our quality of life while also growing our economy? And all of this takes planning. So I want to talk about the inland port for a little bit. Our goal is economic development. There's a lot of other folks out there that do this. You've got at the city level, county level, you've got at the state level, folks and groups that focus on economic development. Our focus on economic development is regional. And those regions, those areas are not defined by us, they are defined by you, and they're defined by the business partners or the public sector partners that come to the table. It can be as big as the 400,000 acres you're working with right now with some folks out in Juab, or it can be as small as 7,000 acres that we're working with in Weber. But those are areas. It can go even smaller. If you want to bring if you want to bring in an alternate energy corridor to help move goods and people, we can focus on that. If you want to bring microgrid architecture into some industrial spaces that focus on innovation or research, we can do that as well. And so our focus becomes whatever you need our focus to be. But the focus is economic development. And we have a very wide lane that we can travel through in making it become whatever it is that you and your partners need it to be. And that's the shift for anybody that has been following the inland port over the last several years. That's the shift that has been made. If you go look at statute, economic development is there. The transportation and movement efficiencies, getting the efficiencies of transportation and movement of goods, that is all there. And that is stuff that we've been taking a look at. But that economic development on a regional basis and an area basis, or even if it's just infrastructure that you need in order to grow your economy, that is our focus. And this is how we come about and do it. We convene, we meet with you, we meet with your business partner, and then we identify what the needs are. We help you identify what those needs are if you don't know what they are. And then we bring in strategic financing, we bring in expertise, we help you connect the dots, and we help you implement it. And so that is what the inland port does. And these are the headwinds that are facing not just Utah County, but it's facing the entirety of the state. And it's global, and it provides a lot of opportunities that we could take advantage of if we can sit down, think it through, plan it out, and do so in a partnership type of a level. So that 1.5 million people that we're going to grow into here seems like a tsunami, but for us, it's really just a wave of opportunity. This is our lane. We claim it. We own it. We have money in the bank. and we're open for business. Thank you.
Well, good morning, and I'm truly delighted to be here and appreciate the opportunity. I'm Alan Matheson, the Executive Director of the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority. That's the entity that the legislature created to oversee the redevelopment of what has been the Draper Prison site. And it consists of a board of 11, including the Lieutenant Governor, 4 legislators, a couple of local mayors, the heads of the state agencies overseeing construction and facilities and economic development, Commissioner of Higher Education, which I think signals something, and some private sector expertise. The media has talked about this project, The Point, as being a generational opportunity. And the more I've learned about the opportunity, the more I see that that really is the case. We've been through a process of selecting development partners for our first phase. And they've said this is the top infill development project in the country over the next few years. Puts a little bit of pressure on anybody who's involved in the project. But it is something that is, I think, important and a great opportunity. And the question, I guess, is why? What makes it such a great opportunity? And I think there are a number of reasons. One, we live in a really dynamic place. And this project, it's not in Utah County, and I know this is a Utah County symposium here, but it's right on the border of Utah and Salt Lake counties. And what happens there is going to be dependent on what happens in Utah County, and it's going to have an influence on Utah County. It's between these very fast-growing metropolitan regions in an area with a great workforce, right in the heart of Silicon Slopes. It's a great high-tech community, served by really good infrastructure, including I-15, Bangerter Highway, future transit, state support, which makes a big difference. Those who are looking at investing here, the companies that are looking to move in, say because of the state support, we can have some confidence that this is going to move ahead. Beyond that, it's just a beautiful spot. And I think we really want to take advantage of that. We're not operating in a vacuum. We're operating under direction from the legislature who set the marching orders for us. And they're kind of outlined here. But I think something that's important to mention is that each of those directives came directly from public involvement. Number of workshops, thousands of Utahns weighing in. And they came up with a series of objectives for the Point of the Mountain region. Kind of think Saratoga Springs to Sandy. And those objectives were translated directly into legislation. You can see it's workforce development, it's economic development, it's improving the environment, it's transportation, it's creating quality of life, it's opportunities for research and development, for coordination, collaboration. In short, we're to solve the world's problems on 600 acres, so we're actively involved in that. But take those very seriously. We look at this site as an opportunity to develop Utah's innovation community, a place that solves problems in this area, a place that spurs research and innovation, that takes ideas and nurtures them to commercialization and creates new businesses. We're really excited for a partnership with the Utah System of Higher Education. And Representative Jefferson Moss is leading that effort to bring all of our academic institutions together with business and industry to provide the resources to ensure that we have an innovation district here that's second to none, that will attract some of the most innovative and inspiring companies in the world, that will bring the talent of Utah into a place where we can take our best ideas and do something with them. So it's an exciting opportunity. It's something we're looking forward to building, and we think it'll make a difference in the lives of people throughout the state. But if you talk to people about this project, the question that comes up over and over and over again is transportation. What is this going to do to already difficult traffic in the area? And I think we're all asking that. And I'll give you the news right now. Without this project, the models already show that we're going to have increasing traffic problems. But we feel a responsibility to make sure that we can minimize the impact of this project, but also set an example for future developments in ways that we can generate less traffic, use vehicles less, and still get around and have economic opportunity and high quality of life. So let me talk about some of those features. One is there's this planning concept called the 15-minute city. It's growing, I think, momentum around the world. And the concept is that you can access your day-to-day needs in life within a 15-minute walk. This site is ideally sized geographically for that concept. And we're trying to build on that. There are a number of features in the framework plan that I think are relevant to transportation. One is a mix of uses, getting uses close together so people can live, work, play, purchase goods and services, all within a really small area, within a 5-minute walk. We're putting little districts throughout the site that will have a mix of uses so people can get around easily. Beyond that, there's a greenway system, so you can get throughout the site on trails and green spaces without getting on a road. There will be future transit. You can kind of see it in that magenta line coming north to south, but high-quality transit that will connect Front Runner through the site and into Utah County. We think that that's vital. And in fact, the kinds of companies that we're recruiting say it's absolutely vital that we have high-quality transit in this area. But we're looking a little bit beyond just the land uses to a number of strategies that together we call a one-car community. Now, people may need a car for those weekend trips down to southern Utah. They need a car for a member of the household that commutes. But beyond that, you won't need one around this site. And there are various elements, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of them, but certainly transit is key in that. And UTA and UDOT right now are doing an in-depth study to determine the appropriate mode of that transit, whether it's bus rapid transit, like you see at UVX, or it's rail, or something beyond that. Certainly the regional transportation system in the area is critical. So we're working very closely with UDOT on ways that we can get people into and out of the site. Shockingly, when they built the prison, they weren't thinking about getting people into and out of the site. But it's a different story now. And so looking at north-south boulevards, getting off of Bangerter, ways to have frontage roads along I-15 that will provide access to the site. We expect to have an internal circulator, electric, that will go through the site and get people within a 5-minute walk of any place on the site. There will be mobility hubs where you can go and get a car share. So maybe think of it as a short-term rental. I need to run to Costco down the road, so I need to rent a car for a couple of hours. There will be micro-mobility, scooters, electric bikes. We're exploring this system that one company has where you can get in little 2 to 3 person pods and it'll take you directly to your destination without stopping at every spot along the way, addressing some of the resistance that people have to transit. And then calling, I guess you could call it an app. So this has been used in other places, but think of an app that you could pull up if you're a resident there or working there and say, I need to get to X destination. The app will show you all of the alternatives to get there, how long each will take, how much they'll cost, and help you make good decisions. Looks like this slide isn't working very well, but I'll just explain. We've gone through a lot of detail in coming up with our plan. Worked with experts who have looked at the good, better, and best examples of these different systems throughout the world, and then explored strategies that include a number of those different options, and evaluated them based on relative cost, relative performance, consistent with key performance indicators. And through those scenarios, we've been able to identify a range that we think perform best for the dollar spent and provide some real returns, including significant reductions in vehicle trips each year, real savings in terms of parking. If you don't have as many cars, you don't need as much parking. That parking space can be used for economic generators, new businesses, et cetera. Saving money on congestion because you're not stuck in traffic. You're getting home with your family for dinner, or you're being productive. Health savings in improved air quality, and annual household savings. If you don't need that second car, that saves you, on average, about $10,000 a year. That's money that can go to education, other needs. It can go to help you qualify for maybe a better mortgage, et cetera. So let me just, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but let me just show you a couple of renderings of what we're doing as we refine our phase 1 plans. And you can see the River to Range Trail that will connect the will connect the Jordan River Parkway Trail to regional trails on the east of I-15 for transportation as well as for recreation. We've got a central park in there. There will be this main street that can be closed off for a pedestrian focus with retail on the bottom, offices, residential, outdoor dining, et cetera. We're looking at opportunities for families to get together, a place where people can gather with restaurants. There will be top companies here. We're talking to Fortune 50 companies, household names, that are interested in this site. We're looking at recreation opportunities, as I said. So this is happening now. You'll see demolition in the next couple of months. Infrastructure will go in, and buildings will start popping up in 2025. So we're excited about this, and we look forward to working with all of you to make it a reality. Thanks.
I don't know about you all, but that sounds pretty dreamy when I hear Alan talking, doesn't it? My name is Mary Delamar Schaefer. I'm the Regional General Manager for UTA and Utah County. And yay, thank you. And my office is right by the Orem Front Runner Station. I had the good fortune a couple weeks ago, my baby sister treated me and my 5 siblings to a trip to Italy. She's a good baby sister. And one of the I'd never been to Europe before. I'm not a big traveler, and of course, my eyes were exploding from all the transits that's there. We had a private driver one day, and I said to him, because I saw buses everywhere, and it was really funny because my siblings would say, "Mary, there's a bus. Take a picture. Take a picture. Take a picture." And I had like 100 pictures of buses in Italy to share with my employees. And I said to the driver, "Do you ride the bus?" And he said, of course with an Italian accent. And when I came home, that has stayed with me. So while we're not at the of course stage of riding buses, things have changed significantly since I started at UTA 6 years ago. I used to love to start my speech to an audience like this by saying, how many of you live where you live because of transit? And I no longer can do that because inevitably someone in the audience will now say to me, well, I did move there because of UVX. So Utah Valley Express has been the game changer for us here in Utah County. And I like to thank Andrew Jackson, who carried a heavy load from MAG and kept it on the plate, and Val Peterson, who ensured that our #1 customer, UVU, was there and making sure it happened. Our partnerships with UVU and BYU have been a significant game changer on UVX. So UVX, I'm happy to say this last month, we're back into the numbers that we had pre-COVID, We're around like 9,200 boardings per day in the month of September. Like confetti goes off in my brain when I hear those numbers. That's significant. And those numbers are like the numbers that you might see on a TRAX line, except for our UVX is about a third of the cost. It's the unicorn of bus rapid transit systems. When you see Alan talk about BRT, UVX is a bus rapid transit system, and the name is UVX. And everyone comes here and wants to have what we have. But the reason that that works is because all the destinations, UVU, University Place, BYU, downtown, Purple Frontrunner, Orem Frontrunner, it just is sort of a magical system about getting people to the places that they want to go to. I want to also highlight what my friend Andrew was talking about the grid. The importance of that grid cannot be understated when it comes to transit. Like, we can do really efficient transit when we have a grid. And Andrew was regretting that he didn't add this to his speech, so I'll pitch it in there, and that is, we get crowded on I-15 between Linden and American Fork, and it's not because I-15 is different there, it's because the grid doesn't work, and so you got to get off and get on the freeway. And I have the same trouble with buses. When we don't have grids, we can't deliver a good system. So as the cities and the county are working towards a better grid system, it will also help us have better transit. I realize that you all want to go to lunch, but before you go to lunch, you need to learn a little bit about what's happening in transit. So I'll go through the list. Here are things that are happening or going to happen in short order. Thanks to funding from MAG and the local elected officials, we'll be building a park and ride in Saratoga Springs and Eagle Mountain so that we can do more efficient transit. And our short-term objective is have a bus that goes, meets every train from those park and rides. And right now we have one route. It doesn't perform like it should. And it is mostly student ridership and probably will continue to be, but that's an important start for that area. We also are talking about microtransit in Eagle Mountain and Saratoga Springs. So microtransit really is Uber, but run through UTA, and you can use your bus pass. You may have to walk to the corner instead of picking up your house. It can help you get to many locations within a certain defined area, and also to the train stations. Where a bus doesn't make sense and it's just too expensive, that system is working right now in South Salt Lake County and in the west side of Salt Lake City. And we expect to have some of those microtransit opportunities in Utah County. The big project that's in our future is improving our bus route, the 850 that goes up and down State Street from Provo to Lehigh. If any of you have ridden the 850, that is quite the route. Many stops. In the future, we expect that to become a bus rapid transit system. In the meantime, we have a lot of work to make that more efficient, and we'll be doing things like we have funding through our partners, UDOT. By the way, we have good transit because we have good UDOT. Wonderful partners. They've got funding for us to have traffic signal priority so our buses can get through State Street more efficiently. I mean, if you all have driven from Provo to Lehigh and State Street, I just want to say bless you. And you've been behind my bus. So it's hard. That traffic signal priority will help. We need to look at consolidating stations. We need to look at pedestrian improvements. There are some places along there that you getting across the street, you take your life in your hands. A lot of things we're going to do that will move that project along. It is 2.5 times the length of UVX. So it's an ambitious project, but it's in our future. It is the second highest ridership bus in Utah County. I want to backtrack a little bit and brag on UVX because it's what I do. But if you look at the UVX ridership, the next 3 highest ridership buses in the entire UTA system don't quite equal the ridership on UVX. Right? Yeah, we got something going on here. The next important project, which is a UVX project, and that is that we will be building a station on 9th East in Provo, adjacent to the new music building that BYU has built. That was a hotly contested issue before UVX began. And as history shows, it's funny how these things work, the same neighborhood who was against having a station there came back and asked us once the system was in place to put a station in. And we said, yes, please, we'd love to do that. And with funding again through MAG, we'll be building a station there. That station alone will increase ridership on the UVX system by 16%. So we already have a beautiful station here at UVU. I like to think that Val built his business building around that station. I'm not sure that's how it went, Val, but it's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful how it's framed. It's a good story, yeah. It's a good story. There's so much happening in South County, and the question that everyone asks is, when is Front Runner going to go south? So we've done the first planning phase of Front Runner South from Provo. We studied from Provo to Santaquin. We're not going to get all the way to Santaquin. When Val opens up his campus in Payson, he's going to help us get the train sooner, so that's awesome. Right, Brian? Yeah. So we are going to have Front Runner from Provo to Payson because we own rail right-of-way, so that's going to help facilitate that. We're going to work on our next phase of planning. In the initial phase, we do 2% engineering. If anyone can understand 2% and can help me understand it, please share that with me afterwards. I never get quite what that means. But we'll be doing all the engineering in the next phase of the environmental, and that's partially funded, and we'll need more funding to complete that. We didn't go to Santaquin simply because we don't own the right-of-way, and it's very, very expensive once we get out of the rail right-of-way. So from Payson to Santaquin, the first phase will be to have an express bus. So our friends from Santaquin that they're exploding with growth as well will have a way to get to the Front Runner and then get up north. Those are all in the works. The one that's already happened is the Vineyard Front Runner Station. Has anyone used the Vineyard Front Runner Station in here? Yes, thank you. We're out of parking. We opened not that long ago, August, and we have a temporary parking lot. But when our friends start developing very quickly, we'll have more parking. The good news about no development right now is we're using all your streets to park on, and that's good. That's been a really nice success story, and we've increased bus service just to get people back and forth. My success story that only a bureaucrat can appreciate, and there are many of you out there today, is that I was able to get funding off budget cycle, and starting in December, to help increase the bus service to Vineyard, because we can't keep up with the number of people that are wanting to ride, and we can't make the train schedule. So all of you bureaucrats, inside your heart, you're cheering for me on that one, right? It's a big, good thing. So those are all the exciting things that are happening. Transit isn't for everyone, but for the people that it works for, we want to make sure it works well. And so we're working very closely with our local elected officials, trying to make sure that we have plans in place so that we can make that idyllic scenario that Alan just laid out work where it works in Utah County and help people get where they want to go. Thank you.
We'd like to thank you again, Andrew, Chad, Alan, and Mary, for your presentations, and you've given us all a lot to think about. We do have a gift of gratitude for you from the chamber. We now have about 10 minutes until the next session, so you can get up, go to the restroom, go to a different session, or go to the hospitality room and get drinks and snacks, and then we'll start again promptly at 12:30, and then after that is lunch. 3 to 5 minutes. Welcome to the Natural Resources Rapid Fire session. We will hear from Teresa Wilhelmsen, Casey Shaw, and then Marcia Judkins, Representative Judkins, in that order. As a reminder, please put all of your phones and devices on vibrate, and we'll go to that point in our presentation.
So thank you for having me here today and the invitation to come down and present. So my name is Teresa Wilhelmsen. I'm the Utah State Engineer and the Director of the Division of Water Rights. I'm essentially responsible for, my job is to tell water where to go and how to get there. So I oversee the Division of Water Rights and the water right system that we've had within our state for 125 years actually this year. So what I'm hoping to present to you is just how interconnected water is from the state engineer's perspective and what we do and how we manage the water within this valley or in this county. So let me just get started here. all of you are familiar, Utah Lake and the Jordan River. The original decrees for the water rights to use water from Utah Lake are in the Morse Decree that's dated 1901. And it essentially gives water rights to 5 major primary canals within the Salt Lake Valley that use the water for Utah Lake. So those are the primary users of Utah Lake. Some of you may be familiar, there have been compromise levels of Utah Lake between surrounding landowners and the bed of the lake. And the one role that the state engineer also provides is flooding mitigation between Utah County and Salt Lake County. As you can imagine, if flows or releases from Utah Lake are too high, it could cause issues in Salt Lake Valley in the Jordan River. So there is a history of the state engineer having actions regarding flooding. One of the big actions that the state engineer took in 1992 was what's called the Utah Lake Distribution Management Plan. And what that did, it was a public process that included all stakeholders and determined how Utah Lake, the waters of Utah Lake, would be managed to protect existing rights. And it identified primary storage rights and secondary system rights, but it also helped to develop some of the upstream reservoirs and how those would be filled. I do want to mention really quickly here the connection to groundwater. There's been many studies and models done that show the interconnectivity of groundwater to Utah Lake. And so when we make water right decisions, when water right decisions are made, we do take into account how some surface water rights can move to groundwater to have groundwater diversions instead of diverting from the surface. But as we manage these rights, and for those of you who are making decisions for communities, I think it's important to note that you can't manage yourself out of, or you can't use groundwater management or manage with groundwater to get yourself out of bad surface hydrology. It's all interconnected, and if we don't have the surface water that recharges the groundwater, there's not an additional source there. And so a lot of cities do look to drill new wells, but there's probably caution that needs to be there. So let me talk briefly about the Provo River system and some of the complexities that this system has. So the Provo River Decree, it was signed in 1921, and essentially what it did was it managed the resources of the Provo River and identified 2 divisions, the Wasatch Division and the Provo Division. And what the decree did was it was very known that water, if it was spread in the upper reaches, which is Wasatch County, and spread on the lands, even in excess of what maybe was needed for the crops, it would subsurface and eventually come back to the river and provide late season water to the Provo Division users. So that was a mechanism that was designed into the decree. That mechanism is still done today, but it's done with what's called the WICWEP project, and it's operated by the Central Utah Conservancy District, and they operate the WICWEP project. They store water in Jordanelle, and then they make those late season releases to mimic what would have been that natural return that the decree contemplated. So the Provo River project came in 1935, and that's when you see Deer Creek, the Weber-Provo Canal, Duchesne Tunnel coming into play. And I'm going to make a note here on those projects. When you talk about the Weber-Provo Canal, what that is doing is it's making a transbasin diversion from the Weber River system, bringing it over that canal and bringing it into the Provo. So that's just one small piece of an interconnected system that was not connected historically. But it's based on water rights and contracts that had happened. This last year, the Weber River system, if many of you have followed that, I know it's not in Utah County, but they were extremely short. The hydrology made them extremely short on water. The water rights system allowed for contracts and agreements to happen so that some of that water stayed on the Weber and did not come over to the Provo, and that was done through lease agreements. So the water rights system does prove, sometimes folks think we need to redo it or modify it, we need to throw it out and start over. But in my opinion, I think the water rights system gives us the rules and the tools to make decisions of what we need to happen. And I think that Weber-Provo exchange this year demonstrated Weber needed some water, and they knew where to go because of the water rights system to get that. So another trans-basin diversion is the Duchesne Tunnel. That brings water from the Colorado River drainage into this valley. And I think it's important that there's a lot of Colorado River talk that's going on in the media and across 7 states right now. And some of that water does come here. It's not just another basin's problem. It does become a statewide problem or statewide issue that we're working on. So the Bonneville unit, you also saw development of Jordanelle Reservoir and the WICWEP project, that Wasatch County efficiency project that I talked about. And those are projects operated, or those are operated by Central Utah, and you're gonna hear from Casey here in a minute. So that purple water, that's where water flows upstream. We do special pipes for that, I'm joking. What those purple lines represent, when that Utah Lake Management Plan was done and Jordanelle and Deer Creek built, what it allows is when you manage water on a system, you always want to store up high. You store up as high as you can because you can always bring that water down, but you can't really flow it back up very easily or reasonable cost. So what has happened on this particular river system is with that management plan, what happens is that later priority rights store upstream in Deer Creek and Jordanelle. If the primary rights, which are the senior rights, are satisfied out of Utah Lake, an exchange can happen to where that water that's stored up high can convert under the later priority rights. If it can't convert, then they have to send it down. And so those purple lines are kind of representing how on paper water can basically flow upstream. But it does it through paper and by storing high and then making any of those exchanges that are needed to keep existing senior right holders whole. It's a critical component of what happens in this valley and how that operates. And I'm just going to point out on the slide there, you see the Olmsted Power Plant, if you can see that on there. And I think Casey has, maybe we'll talk a little bit more. That is probably the most expensive water right in the state of Utah because of that exchange to keep that priority. Let me go to, let's see, Spanish Fork. This is, again, additional water developed the Spanish Fork River. The decree was 1879. There was another one in 1899. And I'm skipping just a little bit because I'm watching my time. And just a couple of minutes here. But this, the Strawberry system here, you can see all the interconnectivity that is happening there. You see the Strawberry Tunnel. That is bringing Colorado River Basin water to this valley as well. And that's a significant portion that comes through that Strawberry Tunnel. Comes down Diamond Fork into the Spanish Fork River, and that water can get all the way to Salt Lake City. And that interconnectivity is how that water moves in that basin. The Strawberry Valley Project was established in 1905, and then you see the Strawberry Aqueduct and those in the 50s, and then also in 92. So just really trying to highlight a lot of the connectivity within this valley and the water that you see and that you use in Utah County. I'm just kind of flying all of this in real quick. So how do we manage the water rights, and how do we color it? Most people see Utah Lake as blue or green. We actually see it as tones. We account in Utah Lake whose water is what water, and we color it with these distribution accounting models that we have, and measurement and automation, so that we know when we make decisions, water right decisions of who gets what water, it's based on the water right priority system, and how can we move it and manage it. So just a couple maybe highlights there. You see the import water in the middle of that slide there. Again, that is water that's not naturally tributary. It's been brought in because of generational investment and foresight for decades ago of the needs for water. And I think it's important, and I'm just going to end here with 9 seconds, but I think it's important, as those of you that are working in the communities, to understand our water right system and how that can help you make good decisions moving forward with the water portfolios that the cities and counties and entities have. And I'll just point out real quickly, so my office by statute, we can do pre-consultation hearings. If you're trying to figure out what is the best way to shore up and bring prosperity to your communities, please come talk to us. We're happy to help you understand what your water rights are and how they can best be used. So with that, I'm going to conclude. Do you need that one?
There we go. The whole screen, but it's as good as it's going to get.
Okay, which way is forward?
Forward, back,
Okay.
laser pointer.
Good to know. Sorry for the delay. I'm Casey Shaw, Deputy General Manager for the Central Utah Water Conservancy District. I really appreciate Teresa's information. That is an awesome presentation. She flew through it, and I wish it was a little more time because it's really important. We were created in 1964 to manage the Central Utah Project that brings Colorado River water over from the Uinta Basin and allows that to be used in the Wasatch Front. And what Teresa was trying to tell you was that if there's a cut on the Colorado River and we can't get water to go into Strawberry, Jordanelle cannot operate. And we cannot store water in Jordanelle. And so that's why we are so tied to the Colorado River here in Utah. I want to talk a little bit about a wicked problem that we have in Utah. And so you're going to say, well, what is a wicked problem? I don't think it's trying to get a popular Broadway show to come to Utah County. It's more complicated than that. And if you look at wicked problems, typically they're really difficult to solve. They have problems that are interconnected, and usually you don't have enough information to solve them. Typically, applying a solution to a wicked problem results in another problem. And then you have to address that. And frequently, they're really difficult to define. You don't know exactly what the problem is, you just know what the symptoms are. And wicked problems, in many instances, are tied to our values, our culture, our beliefs, and our habits. And so what is the wicked problem we have? Well, it can't be solved by writing a check, and it can't be solved with a short-term, one-shot silver bullet solution. Our problem is we're in the midst of a multi-year, 1,200-year drought. We've either been in extreme or exceptional drought for many years that has depleted both our groundwater and our reservoirs. We have a growing population where we're going to grow from about 3.2 million to over 5 million people before 2060. 1 million of those people are expected to come to Utah County in South Utah County, where there may not be sufficient water development to support that. And that has resulted in a water shortage, not just at Lake Powell, where it's a real problem if you want to launch your boat, but throughout all of Utah. I'm of the opinion that a sustainable and reliable water supply is essential for the continued growth and prosperity of Utah. And that's what we've been working on for the past several years, is to try to ensure that we have a reliable and sustainable water supply here in Utah. So what are some of the causes of our wicked problem here in Utah? Is it too many people? Are we letting people in from California that should not come? Some people believe that's true. Do we not have enough precipitation? That's probably true. Is there a fight between farmers and municipalities? Some people would believe that farmers are using far too much water. Do we have too many big lawns? Non-functional turf? And are our temperatures too high, which results in a longer growing season and more water demand by plants? The answer to all those questions is yes. Every one of those situations has arisen, and we have to deal with them. So what are we doing as a conservation district? And I'll just say the 4 large conservation districts here in Utah deliver water to about 90% of the people in Utah. We deliver it to about 2/3 of the state of Utah. And what are we doing? Well, the state legislature was kind enough, thank you, to allocate $250 million for secondary water meters. Now, why is that important? If we meter our secondary water, which is irrigation water to your home, studies have shown over and over again you can get about a 30% savings in water use. That's huge in terms of water savings. We are also working really hard to do landscape modifications and working with cities to enact development ordinances that require them to do water-wise landscaping so that you get rid of 7-foot or less wide park strips and put in water-wise landscaping, a flip your strip, you've probably heard, local scapes. One local-scaped house will use a third of the water as a regularly designed turf home, so a huge savings there. And then we've been working with institutions and private citizens to do smart sprinkler controllers. The University of Utah worked with us last year, and they saved over 300 million gallons in water use because of their smart sprinkler controllers. The LDS Church has been working with us, and they will have even larger savings as a result of going to smart sprinkler controllers. We're working very hard with farmers to create ag efficiency programs where we can assist farmers in monitoring the plant and crop needs and then metering the water so that they apply it at the time and in the amount needed, which saves a tremendous amount of water. And we're also working with farmers to do payments in lieu of production. And if you can fallow a field and tell a farmer, I'll pay you the value of that crop if you'll let the water go downstream, that is a benefit to both the downstream water users and the farmers. And those programs are used very successfully throughout the western United States. We're also working hard on direct potable reuse. So what is that? That is taking water from the wastewater treatment plant, running it through an extremely stringent and technical treatment process, and then blending that back into your drinking water. And South Jordan is piloting that right now. It's called Pure Sojo, and it is working very well, and they anticipate using direct potable reuse in South Jordan in the near future. This technology has been used in multiple places in the United States. Yes, the biggest problem is perception, no question about it. We're also working with state legislature and large cities to do water reuse so that once you take that water in your tap and then you run it to the wastewater treatment plant, we can intercept it and run it to a cooling tower at a data center or to a large building. And then once it's gone through that, then take it and put it over to the golf course and put it on golf turf or lawn so that you use that water 3 or 4 times before it makes its way to the Jordan River, Utah Lake, and the Great Salt Lake. We're also working with cities for aquifer storage and recovery, where you take excess water that occurs typically during spring runoff, you capture that, you shove it down into the ground so it replenishes your groundwater aquifer, not subject to evaporation. And then during the summer, when the demand is greater, then you can extract that. And so you have a built-in reservoir that's very inexpensive to use. And the state has made a tremendous commitment to increase cloud seeding. And they're going to assist us in building both automatic generators and a number of improved generators where we can go and at the appropriate time start those generators up, seed the clouds, and get a 10 to 15% increase in the precipitation at a very economical cost, $5 to $10 an acre foot, which is remarkably low. And so we're very pleased for the support of the state legislature of that. So how are we doing with our wicked problem solutions? It's a work in progress. There is no silver bullet for what we have to deal with right now. As Teresa wisely pointed out, our biggest problem is hydrology. We're in a drought. And so we need to make both technical and cultural changes in order to manage the water that we're given. I'm confident that the smart people that are working on this will come up with solutions, but there is no single bullet solution to this. And conservation will continue to be a large component of the tools that we wield in solving this wicked problem. So I'll turn this over to Representative Judkins. Thank you.
do it in the wrong place. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe we'll use yours. Oh, no? Okay.
It's coming. Just a second.
Okay, I'm impatient. We'll just sit
I am
and wait
too.
for a minute. Oops, what happened?
It's
Is it just doing its own thing?
going there.
It's figuring it out. Okay. There we go. Okay. I am so excited to be here amongst all of you. And I am Representative Marcia Judkins, and it's been so interesting for me to listen to this, and I'm extremely lucky to be able to learn from experts a lot in my job as a representative. We are, believe it or not, experts at everything, but we're kind of expected to be, and we do have a lot. Oh, I don't know what just happened there. Shoot. Well, either way, whoops, I don't know what I just did. I do want to get here eventually. Sorry. See, I don't know a lot about technology and my computer and how this all works. It's over here. It's like on a different, I have, so, all the grades of my students. Yeah, we don't want that. Okay, here we go. Just like that one right there. Will that work? Oh, can you just stay with me?
I will.
Okay. I was sent, and I think we were all sent. Were we all sent? No, just I was sent, right?
I think
Just the
I think
presenters?
all of the presenters.
All the presenters were sent a survey that went out to the people who were attending this conference. And as I went through what everyone had answered, I was just so impressed. I mean, the wide variety of interests and concerns were echoed mine too, and other legislators. And I love the way that this slide right here, this was in the survey that we got back, and it shows the different, in this word, whatever they call it, word puzzle, I don't know. And something I really appreciated about the two previous presentations that we had too was the word, or the idea that everything is interconnected, right? Things are complex, and sometimes when you think about natural resources, we just automatically go to water or coal or natural gas or whatever it is, right? Whatever. But these things are actually extremely connected to everything else that we do in the state. They're connected to housing and education and infrastructure. Just an example of what I'm saying, I read in the paper yesterday that Dominion Energy is asking for an increased rate. I can't remember what the percentage was. It was pretty hefty, and they, as we all know, inflation has been increasing. The cost of extracting natural gas is increasing, and they need to pay their employees more. And I mean, there's just reasons that they're asking for this increase. But when you when you look at that, who's this going to affect? Well, it's going to affect the consumers. And when you look at affordable housing, or people who are at risk of being homeless, or in very, tenuous rental situations, they're the ones who are going to be affected the most, right? And these increases could put someone into a homeless situation that's already just teetering. And so these things are all related. With water, we need to do more with water, and one of the ideas, which I think is not a bad idea, is to make people pay for the water that they use. Well, what effect does that have on, I don't know, maybe family size, or, because the more kids you have, as you know, as they get to be teenagers and they take their half-hour-long showers or whatever, you are using more water. Not that they should be doing that, and maybe we should be having people pay for that, but it's all this balancing, and it's just the interconnectedness of everything that we do in the state. And something else I want to, like I said, I'm not an expert in this, so I'm going to show you the places I go to where I can learn, and I go to le.utah.gov, so I'm just going to take you on a little tour of this website. And I was telling my daughter, she's 37, she's not 5, she said this thing, that's why I want you to know she's an adult. And I said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to show them so that they, and maybe you already know this, but how to get around in this website. And she said, that's good, because if you teach a fish to swim, and I was like, I don't think that's the saying, right? But Anyway, so you're probably all fish that know how to swim already, but I'm just going to teach you how to swim anyway. So this is the website right here, and you can do a search. You know, you can put anything in here, natural resources, water, coal, I don't know, whatever, and a huge list of things is going to come up that you can go through. And so that's pretty self-explanatory. I just want to show you a couple of other things that maybe you all know already, but it's very helpful to me, and I do have constituents who ask me these questions. So up at the top, they have this committees, and you can see that we have all these different, we have appropriations. The ones that are not the most important, but the ones I'm going to talk about are the appropriations, the interim, and the standing committees. And because these, and I'm going to show you the natural resources where you can find the resources to find out about natural resources here. But if we go into like the appropriations here, and you can see that we have a committee that's the Natural Resources, Agriculture, and Environmental Quality. You click on there, and here are all the meetings that we've had this year over on this side, right here. And over to the right, you can see all of the legislators and staff that are on this committee and assigned to this committee. Because sometimes you want to maybe email everybody in the committee, right? And this will help you find it. Because honestly, people will send me emails about something that's going to be heard in a different committee. And I always say, email the people that are on that committee because that's far more important. They're the ones that are the gatekeepers, right? I only see something after it already passes through the Natural Resources Committee. And then if you look in here in the meeting materials list, for example, let's go to, we can go to Tuesday. Let's see, there was one, oh, right here, yeah. On October 18th, they met. This is the Appropriations Committee that I'm looking at. So these are the ones who review the budget and then prioritize and things like that. And we get a lot of really good information from people like from what you heard today. And I thought you might be interested in, like, you can go here. There's the Utah Lake Algal Bloom Study, and you can watch this video that the legislature heard or watched on algal blooms. So we'll go out of there. Or the Department of Water Quality Harmful Algal Bloom presentation, and there will be the presentation here. Anyway, so you can get the idea of that. The other committee that is involved in natural resources would be the interim committee, and they are the ones who review the bills and different things. Right here, you can go in there, and you can see that there's going to be a meeting on November 16th. They had a meeting on the 19th, and here's all the presentations that they got to watch. You can see what the agenda is. You can actually go in and watch the meeting if you ever have, 2.5 hours of time. But they've also made it, just so you know, it's really nice, where you don't have to watch the whole thing. You can click on whatever interests you, and that's the video that will come up. So you don't have to invest a whole bunch of your life in that. So, and here are the members of the committee once again who review this legislation and hear these presentations, and so there's that. You guys are like, how much longer do you have? Yeah, I'll be done in a minute, promise. This is hopefully this is helpful. I don't know. Here's audits. Audits are always fun. And you can do a search for an audit. You can go in, and you can do this in any topic, right? But a lot of times these audits are so helpful because you can see where, if you read those first few pages, it tells what should this department be doing better or what should we be looking for, and then you can go in and you can see what the department has done to address the concerns in the audit. So anyway, I think audits are fun. And then if we go into budget, how many of you have gone into the budget part? I don't know, Kobe. Yeah, I see some nods and some not, like, who cares? But anyway, you can go into these quick budget facts, and I'm going to sit here. One of the places that I know our financial people are really proud of, and it is quite a feat that they've done, is this COBE, and it's the Compendium of Budget Information. And it is a little complex, But you can go in and see all the sources of funding for everything, right? And then you can also go into each, like if we go into navigate, I'm going to go into navigate, and you can look at, here's all the committees. So if we're looking at natural resources, we can find that cloud seeding. I shouldn't say that I can find it because then I probably won't be able to. But let's go into, you can stop me, I think it might be in natural resources. We'll try that. DNR, yeah. And then, I know I saw it earlier today as I was looking through this. Water resources, maybe? I don't know. Yes, cloud seeding, right there. So you can see the money that the Utah legislature has put into cloud seeding and how it's being spent, and if it's being spent. So anyway, those are just some of the things that you can navigate on the website. If you want to look up your own legislator, you can look up legislators here, but you can also look up bills. Sorry, I don't want to go too long. And browsing by session, I think is like if you want to look up what did my legislator do, I'll just look me up. How about that? See what I did, see if I did anything. I'll look me up, and it will show all the bills that I sponsored and that I co-sponsored. So there you go. And you can see things that way. Also, if you just do a search, let's just do a search for natural resources, and you can see how overwhelming it can be. Natural. I think it's a Boolean search. You guys are so patient and good. All right, so then you can see, you can look at all, you can look at bills, you can see code, and publications are often very helpful because our staff will prepare certain publications for us in PDF form, and you can read those. But you can see that there are thousands of things on here, so it can get a little overwhelming. But anyway, hopefully that was a little bit helpful, and I just want to let you know how impressed I am that you are here and interested in learning these things and being a part of making our community a better place for all of us. So thank you very much.
All right, we'd like to thank you, Teresa, Casey, and Representative Judkins. And we do, on behalf of the chamber, have a little thank you gift. And we will now break, and lunch will be down in the ballroom area at 1:30, so in about 10 minutes. So thank you.